all your fixed costs to invest in that new location. And you have this negative cash conversion cycle with all of your inventory being effectively free, if not profitable for you while it sits there.
Amazing.
All right, listeners, now is a great time to thank new friend of the show, Intapp. You are probably most familiar with their product, DealCloud.
Yeah, DealCloud is the premier deal management and intelligence platform for private capital and investment banking. So if you're at a PE firm, there's a pretty good chance your pipeline and CRM is running on it right now.
Yep, but Intapp is actually much broader. It's essentially the operating system for professional firms, financial, legal, accounting, and consulting. Intapp powers the workflows that run these firms: origination, business intake, compliance, and time capture.
They just announced a product last month that's super interesting. Celeste, their agentic AI platform. We spent some time getting a tour of the product and we instantly got it. It's not just an individual productivity tool. It's firm-wide AI for institutional knowledge with workflows, collaboration, and your firm's history just built right into it.
Which that's probably, David, why they call it Firm AI over there at Intapp.
Yes, indeed. It isn't just general purpose AI that just ingests everything and can be a huge liability for professional firms. You need AI that knows your deal history and your confidentiality requirements and things like MNPI controls or conflicts of interest, and respects all of it natively.
So two big things stuck with me about Celeste. First, the context engine, which is a semantic layer that maps your firm's proprietary knowledge so agents can act on it. If you screen that scalable for the whole... Okay, David, so take us from the first Price Club through to Costco.
So on the back of these eighth wonder of the world like cash flow dynamics that these Price Club warehouses have, Price Club goes public in 1979, 3 years after founding. And I say go public. Not in an IPO, not in a direct listing. They don't list anywhere. They don't raise any money because they don't need any capital. So what happens is there's so much buying and selling activity among the original shareholders because this thing has become so valuable that this is the first time I've actually ever heard of this happening. Price Club crosses the 500 shareholder mark that at the time the SEC mandated if you had more than 500 separate shareholders of a company, you had to start filing as a public company. So Price Club's just like, okay, we'll file. We'll be a public company. They don't list on an exchange. They're just like,
really?
Sure, we don't need the money.
That's crazy. So they're registered with the SEC, but they're not listed on a...
Yeah, it's traded over the counter. They're not on the New York Stock Exchange or on the NASDAQ or anything like that.
Wow. So for those first 3 years, I need to know a Price Club shareholder in order to buy the shares.
Yeah, there probably are some market making systems. I think this is what the over-the-counter market kind of does. But yeah, you can't just go trade it on an exchange.
Wow.
Hilarious. So in 1982, they do ultimately list on NASDAQ, probably just to get more liquidity in the trading. Also in 1982, Saul gets a call from his old buddy Sam Walton. He wants to come out. He wants to see Saul, wants to have dinner with the two Helens, get the families together.
He wants to shop his competitor like he always does.
Yeah, and he's like, you're doing so great with these Price Clubs. I love your second act. I want to come see it in action. And Saul is like, sure, come on out. I think he knows what Sam is up to, but he doesn't really care.
What's he going to stop him from going into a store,
Totally. So Sam and Helen come out. They all have a nice dinner in La Jolla. Saul tells him all about Price Club, how the model works, the cash flow dynamics, everything. Sam, of course, goes back to Bentonville, and within 12 months, guess what pops up?
Sam's Club.
Amazing. And this is really the major difference here between Saul and Sam. Saul doesn't care. He's like, sure. Again, what am I going to do? Stop you? They stay friends. There's this amazing story that Sam tells in Made in America. A few years later, Sam is going around again to Price Club, shopping his competitors with his tape recorder, making notes about how they're doing pricing and inventory and stuff. And the security at the store confiscates Sam's tape recorder. Saul ends up just mailing it right back to Sam, and he's like, keep your notes, it's all good. It's so funny. Right around the same time, another person comes out to San Diego to visit Saul and Price Club. A guy named Bernie Marcus. And for some listeners, that is going to ring a lot of bells. Bernie has a story very much like Saul's. He was the president running the Handy Dan hardware store chain. And he had gotten kicked out by the board and was pretty salty about it and was looking for a second act. So Saul has him out to San Diego. He shows him the Price Club warehouse. He gives him the playbook and he says, look, Bernie, you've got all this hardware expertise. Take the Price Club playbook, go kick their butt and open the Price Club of hardware stores. Bernie Marcus, of course, then goes home, turns around, and starts Home Depot.
Which we have heard from listeners 10 times that we need to do the Home Depot story at some point. I actually did not know Bernie Marcus's name or that he was the founder of Home Depot, so I think now we have to.
Now we have to. So this now brings us finally to one more call that Saul gets also in 1982. There are these like years in retailing, 1962 when Walmart and Kmart and Target start, 1982 when all this is happening. Another Bernie, this time a Seattle retailer named Bernie Brotman and his son Jeff, call up Saul. And they say, Saul, this Price Club thing is fantastic. We're retailers up in the Northwest, up in Seattle. We'd love to open a franchise up here, a Price Club franchise in Seattle. This is just like the Fedco FedMart days. And Saul and the Price Club management team think about it, and they make the very poor decision to say no. And in the same echo of what happened, 30 years earlier, Bernie and Jeff say, okay, we understand. We're going to do it anyway. We're going to clone the Price Club model and start the same thing up in Seattle. And again, I think Saul is totally fine with this.
Because was Price Club growing aggressively?
They were, but they weren't planning to go to the Northwest. They were following the old sort of trade routes of the FedMart playbook of Arizona, Texas, Florida, going out across the South and the Midwest. So what happens next is pretty hilarious. Jeff Brotman cold calls Price Club's head of merchandising and says, hey, my family and us, we're starting up a Price Club clone up in Seattle. We actually think the Northwest is a great market for this. Would you be willing to leave Price Club and come up and be my co-founder? And the head of merchandising is like, well, no. Not because I don't think it's a good idea, but you see, Saul Price is my uncle. And he's like, but let me give you the number of somebody else who you really should call. I think this guy is the right guy for you. We've worked with him for a long time here at FedMart and Price Club. He's now left. He's doing some retail consulting, so he'll probably be willing to talk to you. His name is Jim Senegal.
Ba-na-na.
And this is how it all comes together. Jeff calls Jim, convinces him to come up to Seattle. He's ready. He's ready to run his own show, as they say. So Jim moves up to Seattle. They start Costco. And the business plan is really pretty much exactly just clone Price Club.
And Jim really is Saul's protege. It's like clone Price Club, but with a guy at the helm who is built for scale.
Isaac.
Absolute focus on the details.
Yep. And not only was he Saul's protege, not only is he a tremendous generational talent executor, he also is the guy who ran the division that inspired the whole thing. He really is the perfect guy.
And so, listeners, you might be realizing now, when we were saying at the top of the episode, this really is kind of all one company story. It really is. There is a straight line through from Fedco to FedMart, or let's even just start it at FedMart since it's all the same people, through to Costco today.
So Jim moves up to Seattle. He and the Brotmans raise $7.5 million to get going.
Yep. They sell 50% of the company. To do that, they recruit 8 people immediately, mostly from FedMart, some from Price Club, and they're all sort of 40s and 50s. This is like a gang of 10, 12 people who have all worked together before, industry veterans, have shorthand, and they are just like, we've got the money, okay, go. We know exactly what to do.
I mean, literally, it's like the TSMC story.
Or like the Zoom story. It's like Eric Yuan finding 40 people who knew exactly how to build Zoom and then just doing it.
Yeah, so great. So within a couple months, they opened the first Costco warehouse in Seattle. Then a few months later, they open the second in Portland. Of course, both of them take off immediately. Then they go to Utah, to Northern California, to British Columbia. And this is where you can see that what Saul said about being really great creatively in business at the Prices and Price Club, but not great at execution. Why was Price Club not in Northern California, given that they started in Southern California? These are the kind of mistakes that they made. So this new Costco under Jim hits $1 billion in revenue in less than 3 years after getting started. This is in the 80s.
And $3 billion in less than 6 years, which is the first company ever to hit that milestone too.
It's wild. They go public in 2+ years after founding?
Yeah, 1985 they go public.
Crazy. Once this plays out, and of course Sam's Club is also becoming a juggernaut at this point in time, Price Club is doing fine. Again, capital is not the competitive vector here, but they're not being as aggressive. They're not expanding as fast as Costco and Sam's Club. What happens with Price Club is in some ways sort of the same as what happened with FedMart. As Saul readily admits, he and Robert are great at creative ideas in retail. They're not so great at scale execution. Now, it's different in that capital is not a competitive vector here. Back in the FedMart days, FedMart was constrained. The whole reason they went looking for a capital partner was they needed more capital in order to be able to grow stores and compete with Walmart and Kmart. These Price Club warehouses were paying back their capital investment quite quickly, especially relative to FedMart because of the cash flow dynamics that we were talking about. So Price Club was certainly doing fine. It wasn't declining. But Jim and Jeff at Costco and certainly Sam at Walmart and Sam's Club, they are pedal to the metal, aggressively expanding. And that's not really Saul and Robert's MO.
No. And it does, if you kind of read between the lines in some of this stuff, it does kind of seem like Costco wasn't poaching people from Price Club, but a lot of really good people sort of found their way and went and got jobs at Costco. So Costco definitely had at this point the base of the sort of most aggressive, talented wholesalers of the West Coast.
Yep, totally. And Saul, at this point in his life, he's sort of proved himself again. He's made his point after his terrible exit out of FedMart. He steps back from the day-to-day of the business. He hands that over to Robert. He gets really into real estate. He's not as aggressive as he once was. So in June 1993, Costco and Price Club merged together to form the United Price Costco. And as we've talked about, this really is a reuniting of them.
And at the end of the day, Price Club was either going to land with Walmart or with Costco. And Saul Price didn't want it to be Walmart and very, very much wanted to join forces with Jim Senegal. And so they sort of made that happen. This was the natural successor for this combined business in Jim Senegal.
Now, interestingly, the transaction really is about as close to a merger of equals as I think we've ever seen on the show, with the caveat that Jim is clearly going to be the CEO that's going to run the combined company. At the transaction, 52% of the equity in the combined company goes to Costco shareholders, 48% to Price Club shareholders. They're about the same size, about 100 stores each at the time of the transaction. But Costco is growing way faster, so had they just waited a couple of years, the balance of favor would have been way far in the Costco side of things.
Yeah, and you sort of get the sense that the Costco folks were being very respectful of the Price Club folks because I believe it was something like a 30+% premium paid for Price Club stock. And so I think it was everyone sort of looking at each other and Costco sort of knowing that they could really buy Price Club for a much smaller relative percentage in the future. But why don't we just do this today? I know it's a good deal for Price Club folks. And let's just say pseudo merger of equals. Let's call it and let's be one team from now on.
Yep. And there was a forcing function to this. It wasn't just that Jim had a soft spot for his mentor Saul and for Price Club. Sam's Club and Walmart was aggressively expanding at this point in time. And so if they had waited too much longer, Sam's Club would have just gotten huge and potentially run away with the market. So after the merger happens, even the newly combined Price Costco is still only a hair bigger than Sam's Club in terms of number of stores and revenue. So they kind of needed to do it pretty quickly, or Sam's was going to run away with it.
Fascinating. Which is so funny because it's a much less disciplined business. Every bit of DNA in Costco and Price Club is just so unbelievably disciplined and an admirable way to run a business. And Sam's Club strikes me as a bunch of cowboys who are changing strategies all the time.
Well, it's a second business line under Walmart, of which the main Walmart Supercenter business line is one of, if not the greatest retail business of all time. It's certainly the biggest still to this day.
Yep.
Saul, kind of amazingly, lives to be 93 years old. He passes away in 2009. After the merger, he really devotes the rest of his life, the next 15 plus years, to philanthropy and politics. So he does a ton of charitable development in San Diego. He gives back to USC. USC's public policy school is the Price School of Public Policy, because he also becomes super involved in Democratic politics. And actually, when Obama is running for president in his first campaign in 2008, he comes through San Diego and meets with Saul Price, 92-year-old Saul Price. That's how influential he is, how much money he's giving to the Democratic Party in this kind of last chapter of his life.
Do you know who speaks at the 2012 DNC when Obama is getting reelected?
I do. Jim Sinegal.
Yep. So they really are, when I say ideologically similar or the natural successor or almost like another son of Saul Price, Jim Sinegal and Saul Price really are of one mind in many ways.
Except Jim is a way better executor.
All right, so let's talk about the execution of this business a little bit. And there's some concepts that I think we've talked about at a high level, but we haven't really drilled into why they work so well. And honestly, I have like 10 or 12 of these, David. So we're going to talk about two important ones now, and then we'll get into more as we sort of make our way to modern day a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So one that we haven't talked about is the economics of membership. And there's the obvious ones that everyone sort of realizes. Today, the base level membership is $60. And as a consumer, I assume I'm getting some kind of good deal by paying $60. And that even before learning too much about Costco, I'm aware that that $60 is something I'm paying upfront to get the benefit of some low prices later. But let's analyze some of the second order effects of membership, which I think are potentially even more interesting than the obvious ones.
There's a lot of psychology happening here.
Yes. The first one is that it actually selects for wealthy customers.
Yes, this is amazing.
As does buying in bulk. So the items that you're buying are literally cheaper per unit. So you're saving money, but you need to buy a lot of it up front, just like you need to pay a membership fee up front, which means that they tend to get members who are not sensitive to cash flow. And they also tend to get members who have space to store stuff at home. And so I looked into some of the data on this to try and put some numbers to it. There was an independent research firm that found that the typical Costco consumer makes about $125,000 a year in household income and has a 4-year degree. Walmart, by comparison, has a median income of about $80,000. And keep in mind, the median US income is $71,000. So Costco shoppers have a 70% higher income than the US median.
Yeah, this is one of the most surprising things about Costco. They have the lowest prices, but they have the wealthiest consumers of any major retailer.
Yes, it's totally fascinating. And very smart consumers, people who can kind of look at the deal and go, actually, I know I'm coming out ahead on this. Another interesting psychology around this is when you pay $60 up front, it encourages you to come and use the membership. You are more likely to shop because you've prepaid some of your margin dollars.
I think this is called the endowment effect, if I remember back to my psychology classes.
Yes. You just sort of assume that you're getting some kind of good deal by prepaying for a membership up front. So you want to go maximize the margin dollars that you're able to get on their discounts, which is totally fascinating. Another one is that membership further decreases shrinkage. We already talked about the fact that employee retention is great for making sure people don't steal things. So this membership makes it so members don't want to lose their membership. You sort of feel like you're part of some sort of club. On top of that, These items are huge. They're hard to steal. How do you steal a TV? How do you steal a 2.5-pound thing of nuts? And so there's like all these factors. Membership is one of them that really contribute to low shrinkage.
Yes, now you mentioned getting a good deal. We talked earlier back in the FedMart days about how loss leaders and sales was kind of an anathema to salt price. How does that play into this?
Yes, this is super interesting. So Costco basically wants to provide insane value to consumers. They want you to get a better deal as a member than you could possibly get by shopping anywhere else. And so how do they go about doing this? They have enforced a strict cap on the margin that they are willing to make on any product. So they have decided internally that they are not allowed to mark up anything more than 14% above what the suppliers sell it to them for. And I'll tell you, they are tough but fair with their suppliers in making sure that they get a great price for their members. And so Costco decides we will only mark up anything a maximum of 14%. They actually do mark other things up less than that because things like electronics, they actually can only mark up 6, 7, 8%. So maximum 14%. The only exception to this is Kirkland's Signature, where they cheat a little bit and let themselves go up to 15%. Quite indulgent. So how does this compare? I think that's the interesting thing here. A common practice at department stores is literally 100% markup. Someone gets a good for $50, they sell it for $100. I mean, even at Walmart, a discounter, quote unquote, marks up 25%, which is almost twice as much as Costco's margin. And so Jim Senegal has a great quote on this. He was asked about it, and his response was, "You could raise the price of a bottle of ketchup to $1.03 instead of $1, and no one would know. Raising prices just 3% would add 50% to our pre-tax income. Why not do it? It's like heroin. You do it a little bit and you want a little more. Raising prices is the easy way."
Well, and I think also, back to the membership, it all comes back to member trust. The members have to trust that they are going to get the absolute best price on everything and that Costco isn't going to be playing these games. Otherwise, they would just go shop at Amazon or Walmart or wherever.
You're exactly right. The value proposition 40 years ago was you are going to get the very best deal possible on the goods that you're buying here. Extreme value proposition is what they like to say. And the fact that they've just made that true every year for 40 years is something that really does stick in people's psyche. And I totally get the heroin line. I think it's so easy to decide to cheat one year, and then in all the future years, you're going to cheat because you've broken expectations with customers, with shareholders. There's something kind of magical, even in the relationship between Costco and a supplier, where a supplier knows that when Costco is being really tough on them to give the lowest price, Costco is not going to turn around and then mark it up 50% and make a bunch of money. Costco is going to make the same margin that they've always made on that good.
Totally. It's worth double clicking on the supplier relationship for a sec. Costco's relationship with their suppliers is worlds apart from Walmart's relationship with their suppliers. You go to Bentonville as a supplier and you are getting put through the gauntlet. It is designed to squeeze you as much as possible. That is not how the supplier relationships work with Costco. They'll work with their suppliers. They'll understand your business. They'll come see you.
Yeah, okay. I was going to save this for later, but we got to do it now. The Costco Code of Ethics, as it exists today, largely inspired by the FedMart values from 40, 50 years before, are in order. Obey the law. Number one, first and foremost, obey the law. And we will save that for a moment. I've got a fun story of how that came to be. Number two, take care of our members. And listeners, when you're listening through these, the order is important, the subject of each statement is important, and the phrasing of each statement is important. So one, obey the law. Two, take care of our members. Three, take care of our employees. Four, respect our suppliers. And I find it fascinating that they use the word respect because they have a posture of tough but fair. And so there's this great anecdote, and I mean, I heard one, but there's 50 examples of this that you can find in various Tegas calls or talking with people who are suppliers to the company, where Costco buyers always ask why when a supplier tries to increase the price. And that part's not that novel. I imagine a Walmart buyer also tries to ask why. The buyers are very deep So they actually know the commodity prices of ingredients from suppliers. So let's take like a chocolate company, for example, that sells a chocolate product. If the chocolate company said, hey, the chocolate costs more now, the Costco buyer would say, well, I know the price of cocoa. I've been watching the commodities market. I understand milk, sugar, butter. Why is it more expensive? Just give me feedback on that. And a lot of the times it is like a commodity price has gone up, or they use labor in a certain area that's gone up, or maybe they have a long dated contract with a supplier of their own that, has an artificially high price for some reason until the contract expires. And so the Costco buyers will write all of this down, will keep track of it. And because they manage so few accounts, they actually can keep track of it. Like each buyer is only really adding 3, 5, 10, maybe 15 new SKUs a year, but you manage a very tight set of relationships. So they'll just call the supplier back and say, hey, last time we talked, you mentioned that cocoa prices were high. I've noticed they've gone down. Are you lowering the prices so that we can lower it for our members? It's like this really amazing side benefit of having the low SKU count is that they can be tough but fair with suppliers and really stick to it.
So awesome.
And because of Costco's gross margins always being targeted at 11%, capped at 14%, this means that for every dollar that Costco gets a supplier to reduce the price on something, again, tough but fair, the customer actually sees most, 89% of the benefit. And so Costco really does just get to pass, whenever they get a benefit, 89% of that benefit goes to the member. So the way I look at this is some companies always look for ways to make more margin. Costco specifically does the opposite. They look for ways to provide more value to members and retain them for members as longer and get them to get their friends to be members. And they try hard across the board to get lower overhead costs through cleverness and efficiency, not through squeezing or underpaying or anything like that.
So there's a really fun acquired cinematic universe story related to this, which is the famous, as chronicled by Brad Stone in the Everything Store, coffee date between Jim Senegal and Jeff Bezos in 2001, which occurs at the Starbucks inside of the Bellevue Barnes and Noble, of all places.
That's right.
So perfect. And at the time, this is 2001, Amazon stock was in the dumps. They were under pressure from Wall Street. Jeff and the organization were embarking on a campaign of raising prices on Amazon.com to get profitable. And they had just started this rolling out. It was super important. Jeff has this coffee with Jim, and Jim explains this philosophy to Jeff. Jeff comes back to Amazon HQ the next day and is like, I'm reversing the policy, and says exactly what you just said. There are two types of companies in this world: companies that work hard to charge their customers more, and companies that work hard to charge their customers less. Henceforth, as of today, Amazon is a company that works hard to charge its customers less. And that is directly from Jim Senegal.
Wow. That's awesome. So on this point number 4 of suppliers, here's some quick math that illustrates why they do have to be so careful and why they do wield such an enormously large stick. So Walmart's revenue today is about 3 times Costco in the US. But since Costco sells so few items, they are a massive customer for any given supplier. They always have this super lopsided relationship. The average revenue per product, because of the SKU count, at Costco is about 10 times Walmart.
Wow.
So anytime they're in a negotiation, almost every time, the person sitting across the table is looking at Costco like, you are my largest customer.
You're like 50% of my business.
I think they try not to have that be the case, but it's very easy for it to become that. So it is really important that they have it as one of their sort of 4 main tenets: respect our suppliers. Now, notoriously missing from these 4 is the notion of a shareholder. And Jim Senegal articulates, if we do these 4 things throughout our organization, and again, those 4 things are obey the law, take care of our members, take care of our employees, respect our suppliers, in that order, then we will achieve our ultimate goal, which is to reward our shareholders.
It's so funny. Going back to our previous episode and Rob Strasser's 10 principles at Nike, and on the one hand, the Nike principles and the Costco principles are about as far apart as you could imagine. On the other hand, Rob Strasser Nike principle number 10 is, if we do the right things, we'll make money damn near automatic.
Right.
And that really is the same thing at Costco.
100%. So, fun story of how these code of ethics came to be. So, in the mid 80s, the Washington State Liquor Control Board was putting Costco through the ringer when Costco was applying to sell alcohol. And I think at the time it was just beer and wine. And basically, the Liquor Control Board was looking for any possible reason to deny them. And I think there might have been some corruption going on. The state had a vested interest in preventing very large retailers from becoming the volume of selling beer and wine. And Costco, because they were started with this ethos, came through squeaky clean and actually got the permit. There was literally nothing that you could sort of drudge up on them to deny them. And so the company was fortunate to realize at very early days how much it would pay off to be truly above reproach. No matter how tempting anything was, they had to build a culture that was completely obsessed with this code of ethics. And you just see it everywhere. I mean, the wages, the way they treat suppliers, the fierce fixed cap on markups, the discipline not to raise memberships constantly. I think it's been like 6 years between the last two times they raised the membership, even $5. It's a ludicrously squeaky clean and long-term oriented mindset.
So back to the story. At the time of the merger, the combined company was about $16 billion in revenue. That was up from Costco alone was $3 billion in 1989. So by the merger in 93, Costco and Price Club are each about $8 billion in revenue and then 16 together. So fast growing, impressive scale already.
And stores more concentrated on the West Coast, but around America by this point?
Yeah, a combined 200 stores. So pretty large footprint. They're in Canada, they're in Mexico. They've already started international expansion, which then is going to become huge throughout the 2000s, as we'll see for Costco. But right around the time of the merger, Costco takes a pretty important step that unlocks a huge part of the next chapter for the company. And that is the creation of the famous Kirkland Signature house brand. And there's a fun story around this. When they were talking about creating their house brand, the company's corporate headquarters was in Kirkland, Washington, right near Bellevue, right across the lake from Seattle. And so that's where the Kirkland Signature name came from. I think by the time they actually launched it, they had relocated to Issaquah, a little farther south. And they're like, we can't call this Issaquah Signature.
No. Kirkland Signature is good.
But it was tied in with international expansion because they needed a brand name and a trademark that they could clear across all the countries that they were operating in and planning to operate in. And so Kirkland Signature, like, that works in Japan, that works in Korea, that works in Taiwan.
It sounds so generic. Like, I didn't even put it together when I first moved to Seattle 12 years ago that the Kirkland over there was of Kirkland Signature, because Kirkland kind of just meant nothing to me. It meant, you know, what's the Whole Foods version, the 365.
Yeah.
Interestingly, over time, Kirkland Signature has come to mean something, and that is a certain level of quality. Nobody is attesting that this Kirkland Signature sweatshirt is a Lululemon sweatshirt that has fancy materials and the most cutting-edge technology in it, but it is of a certain bar of quality that is sufficient for Costco members. And that is sort of the ethos that Costco has around Kirkland Signature, that we're only going to put something out there if we feel that we can create value for you, that it's going to be a lower price than what you could get otherwise, or the flip side of that, that we can make a better product than you could get from any of these branded products that we were either previously stocking or evaluating stocking.
And maybe the most obviously and perhaps most famously where this comes to bear is in wine and liquor sales. The Kirkland Signature wine, you know, you'll get people who are wine snobs that'll drink Kirkland Signature wine. They're like, yeah, it's, you know, Costco, but like, this is actually good stuff. And tequila and vodka, it's the same thing.
Oh, and especially for these things that are very clearly difficult to make, and therefore it's made by one of a few people, like it's made by a real winemaker, or like the batteries, definitely made by a company that makes other batteries. It's not like they're low quality batteries. So I do think, much like their 11% target gross margin on everything, Costco looks at their house brand as an opportunity to provide value to members, not an opportunity to capture more margin for themselves.
Yeah. Now, they also have a pretty unique opportunity, they realize, with their house brand. Because of the very small number of SKUs that they're putting in the warehouse, there's much less competition on the shelves for any given product category for the house brand. So like, yeah, you mentioned, Whole Foods has the 365 house brand, Walmart has their house brand, blah, blah, blah. All these big retailers do. Safeway certainly does. But in a standard retail environment, the house brand is going to be one of like 5 or 6 or 10 different brands of a given product category on the shelves. At Costco, it's one of 2, 3.
Or one of one. I mean, if you go buy the mixed nuts are Kirkland Signature mixed nuts. The jumbo cashews are Kirkland Signature jumbo cashews. And in part because the buyers were evaluating the whole landscape and they determined we can do something better for less. I think the Costco fancy mixed nuts is the best mixed nut blend. But I think that was an enterprising buyer who was being creative and working with suppliers and thought like, I actually think we can provide a better product for a lower price than what exists on the market. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of scenarios where they have. Certainly, consumers agree. $52 billion of Kirkland Signature sales were done last year. That does not include the Kirkland Signature gas. So out of Costco's $230 billion top line, a little under a quarter of it was Kirkland Signature sales, and closer to a third if you include the gas.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's America's largest consumer package brand.
So at the same time, too, as they're spinning up Kirkland Signature in the kind of mid to late 90s, they also start expanding internationally. So first they go to the UK, then they go to Korea, to Taiwan, to Japan, ultimately China, which is now a big initiative for them. What's interesting is, I think at the time, I suspect there were very few other Western-style global or globally aspiring retailers that were entering Asian markets, because it's not exactly obvious that a huge warehouse with bulk packaging would work in cultures like, say, Japan, where people live in tightly packed, dense urban environments, much smaller houses and apartments than in America. This is not the land of SUVs and suburbs.
Right.
But it works great.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, people really like value. High quality products at a great value is a super compelling value proposition for anyone in the entire world.
Totally.
I want to go back to something that we've been wading into in the discussion of Kirkland Signature, which is, why is it okay that at Costco, they can only have 3,800 SKUs? Like, why are people okay with this deal where I don't need selection when I shop here? And I think there's a few illustrative examples of the story from here that get into that. All right, listeners, this is a great time to thank one of our favorite companies here at Acquired, Sentry. That's Sentry, like someone standing guard.
Yes, Sentry helps developers debug errors and latency issues, pretty much any software problem, and fix them before users get mad. As their homepage puts it, they are considered not bad by over 4 million software developers.
Today we are talking about the way Sentry works with another company in the Acquired universe, Anthropic. Anthropic used to have some older infrastructure monitoring in place, but at their massive scale and complexity, they instead adopted Sentry to help them fix issues faster.
Yep. Crashes can be a massive problem in AI. If you're running a huge compute job like training a model and one node fails, it can affect hundreds or thousands of servers. Sentry helped them detect bad hardware so they could quickly reject it before causing a cascading problem. Sentry also enabled them to debug massive issues in hours instead of days, so they could get back to their training runs.
And today, Anthropic relies on Sentry to track exceptions, assign errors, and analyze failures in real time across all of the primary languages used by Anthropic's research teams, including Python, Rust, and C++. According to the Anthropic team, Sentry gives our developers one place that will have all the information they need to debug an issue.
And speaking of AI, Sentry now has an AI debugger called Seer. Seer is an AI agent that taps into all the issue context from Sentry and your codebase to not just guess, but root cause gnarly issues and propose merge-ready fixes specific to your application.
We're pumped to be working with Sentry. They have an incredible customer list, including not only Anthropic, but Cursor, Vercel, Linear, and more. If you want to fix your problem that Ben and David sent you.
Yes, and they're offering 2 months free to all.
Well, a lot of ways, but it was just assumed that you had to. But Costco makes the opposite bet. They bet that you don't need selection as long as you ensure that everything you can buy is high quality. And that is the crazy thing that has worked. Costco essentially has its entire buying team's ethos sort of shopping for you. They're pre-selecting the best one or two items in every category, and consumers, because they do all that work ahead of time, are basically just okay sacrificing selection entirely and saying, yeah, as long as you give us good value on great stuff, we're totally okay with that. That's an important unlock. You can't just have low selection and be like, well, it's all cheap stuff. It has to be like high quality in its category and the best deal on the market in order for people to be okay with low selection, which drives low SKU count, which drives all the amazing things we've talked about so far.
Yeah, it comes back to trust. And part of this, too, also harkens back to Saul and the FedMart days. Saul developed this kind of principle back in FedMart that he called the intelligent loss of sales.
Yes, I was waiting for you to bring this up.
Yeah, so this isn't necessarily the number of brands in terms of the selection out there. This is about product sizes. So today, Costco has taken this to the extreme of like, you can only buy the 2.5 pound jar of nuts. There's no like 8-ounce jar of nuts.
Well, you can buy a whole bunch of little packs of afternoon packs of nuts.
Either way, you're walking out with a lot of nuts.
Yes.
But other retailers and everybody back in the FedMart days had all sorts of different sizes of products. And the idea was that by having different sizes, you would maximize the surface area of customers in market that you could reach. Like Saul uses the example in the book of household lubricating oil, like kind of WD-40 type stuff. He's like, we only carried the 8-ounce can, even though there was like a 3-ounce can out there. We lost some sales from customers that only needed 1 or 2 ounces and thus would only buy a 3-ounce can, and they just didn't buy the 8-ounce can. But it was worth it to us to forego that because by only having the 8-ounce can, we could reduce the number of SKUs that we had and get all of these benefits that you're talking about.
I mean, yes. You and I have been trying to do this without having a name for it for years. People sponsor required seasons. There are lots of other podcasts that let you do all kinds of crazy stuff. And we're just like, look, we have a SKU. It's called The Season. We would love to work with you on that. And it makes our lives so much better, and we can run our business in a completely different way by having a low SKU count.
Totally. If we didn't do it this way, we would need to have an ad sales team or work with, an outsourced network or something like that. That would add way more overhead to our business that we don't want.
Right. This stuff is all about the trade-offs you are willing to make and just daisy chaining them together such that the benefit of each trade-off plays into the benefit of another trade-off that you are making in a way that's aligned.
Yep. I knew we were going to love Costco.
Honestly, it's like maybe my favorite business that we've studied. Let's wait till the end to talk about that. But there's a few more things along the way that happened in the 90s and 2000s before we get to today that I think are important to touch on. We've mentioned logistics a few times, and that the low SKU count means that they can meaningfully simplify their logistics. And to put a point on that, they only have so many suppliers who are bringing goods to Costco. The fact that they sell in bulk means that they can bring a whole pallet into a warehouse and consumers just sort of come and pluck it off the pallet. It's wholesale. It's a wholesale club. But there's something we haven't talked about, which is Costco's distribution centers. So they use something called a cross-dock system for their distribution centers. Now, remember I mentioned back in the Price Club days, it's a little bit more complicated today. Not all the suppliers just show up to the one store, the one warehouse with all the goods. They actually do need some system to receive things from suppliers and bring them to stores.
Yeah, back in the Price Club days, there were no distribution centers.
Exactly. But here's how the distribution centers work. Trucks pull up on one side and unload pallets, and that's where the suppliers' trucks are. On the other side of the warehouse, there are Costco trucks. And so what happens is, since they move stuff entirely by the pallet, no partial pallets, no these few things go to this store, these few things go to that store, the supplier trucks unload the pallets, they just get scooted across the dock to go directly to a Costco warehouse. And then within minutes to hours, that truck leaves and there's no unwrapping of individual boxes. There's nothing sitting overnight in the facility. This is so much simpler, and it really plays into that cash flow dynamic where things can be available for sale so fast. And just to underscore how differentiated the system is, 92% of Costco's merchandise is cross-docked. Only 10% of Walmart has cross-docked merchandise on a pallet system like this.
And it's not like Walmart hasn't invested many tens of billions in their distribution and logistics systems.
Totally. It's just that Costco has made a trade-off that makes it so that they just have a much simpler operation. And they've got all the downsides that come with the trade-off, no selection, but they get all the upside that comes from it too. And so this also plays into this labor thing. You can totally pay your employees more when you need less people to generate the same amount of sales. You don't have wasted manpower unwrapping items from pallets, no one turning the labels out to look pretty. The customers do all of this. So it legitimately means they just need less people. And this is why they generate over $730,000 of revenue per employee. They're just efficient in aligning their trade-offs.
I love it. This is the bricks and mortar retail version of the SaaS business fallacy, which we fall prey to all the time on the show, which is if you invest in or build or around SaaS companies and SaaS company margins, you can fall into the trap of thinking, well, why would I ever want to be involved in a business that doesn't have 90% margins? But actually what you should really care about, especially as an investor, is not your margin percentage, but your absolute margin dollars. And so, yes, Costco has much lower margins than their competitors, but the volume that they drive and the actual dollars end up being worth it.
Yeah, even though Costco is only an 11% gross margin business and only ever will be an 11% gross margin business, it's still a pretty amazing business to own.
Yeah, I mean, it's, what did you say, $230 plus billion of revenue?
And $7.5 billion of operating income off that. So again, tiny little sliver margins, but $7.5 billion of operating income falling out the bottom is pretty awesome.
Yep. Especially $7.5 billion of highly defensible operating income.
Yeah, seriously. And as you've been talking about, because of the way that their inventory is financed, a reasonably capital light business, all things considered. I mean, they're building these warehouses on huge pieces of real estate, with gigantic shelving and all this headcount. And it's an amazingly capital efficient business. It's weird.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's time to talk about investing nerds' favorite aspect of the Costco story, which is that there really are two different businesses here under one roof. There is the retailer, and then there is the membership business. It's almost like way back Saul and Robert sitting in the office after FedMart thinking, you know what? We actually had two different businesses at FedMart. Costco is also two different businesses. There is the operations of the retailer, and then there is the membership business.
Right. And psychologically, they're one thing. It's one experience for the customer, but financially, it's two entirely different things.
Yeah.
So a lot of people like to make a lot of hay about the idea that Costco generates all their profit on memberships and that retail is just a break-even business. And this has been popular to say because they run the retail business at such thin margins. And memberships are nearly a 100% margin business. I mean, really, what does it take to run a membership business?
Yeah. With like a, 90% renewal rate?
Something crazy high like that.
Talk about a SaaS company.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's not quite
What
true.
a comeback.
It is accurate to say that membership fees represent about 70% of the company's operating income, with the other 30% of the profit margins coming from retail. It's been a little bit more than 30% in recent years, but that's sort of the historical split. Think about it as sort of a 70-30 thing. It really is staggering that a business that does $230 billion top line, 70% of the profits can come from the $4 billion of revenue they generate from memberships. That tells you how razor thin the margins are on their retail business, almost to the point where you're like, why do they care about growing sales at all? All they should care about is increasing retention of members. The split is just significant enough for the retail business where you're like, okay, yeah, we should care about growing sales in the retail business. But if it wasn't 70-30, if it was 90-10 or 95-5, you'd kind of be like, well, I'm actually not sure why we care about making a single another sale of toilet paper, because unless it is increasing the likelihood someone retains, I don't care about it. And they're not quite there, but they're almost there.
Well, except though, the way that you grow memberships is you grow retail sales.
Right. But for the last several years, they have totally been growing retail sales per member. And if it was like a 95-5 split, you sort of could make the argument of like, why do they care about growing the retail sales per member? But at this sort of more 70-30-ish split, there's just enough profit dollars coming from the retail side of the house where you care about that too.
I love it. It's like Amazon and AWS versus Amazon retail.
Yes. In the last 25 years, membership has grown from nearly nothing, if you look at what the numbers were in the early 90s, compared to today, $4.5 billion.
Yeah. I mean, when we were talking about the FedMart days, like it was $2 for a lifetime membership.
Crazy. And again, David, this membership business takes almost no investment.
They don't do any advertising.
Right. To quote our friend Andrew Marks, I basically think that Costco has decided to only be a decent return on invested capital retailer, which allows them to have an insane return on invested capital membership club business.
Yep.
It's so true. Again, to quote Andrew, insanely stable growth on a huge capital light fee stream.
I mean, that sounds like a venture capital management company.
It's pretty wild.
All right. Speaking of membership, let's talk about the last big innovation piece of the puzzle before we get to the business today. And that is the two-tiered Costco membership system and the executive memberships, which they launch in 1998. Is that right?
Yes, 1998, the executive membership. So what is the executive membership and why are we bothering to spend time on it? Isn't it just a second higher price membership? It is super illustrative of management's thinking. So I love this as a microcosm for all of Costco. So you can spend an extra $60, so total $120 instead of $60. And what you get for that is 2% cash back on your transactions. Now that 2% cash back is limited, but it's limited at something crazy. Like you can only get $1,000 back.
A $60 incremental investment for $1,000 back is pretty good.
Right. And if you actually hit that $1,000, it would mean you're spending $50,000 at Costco a year.
Oh, wow. I'm sure there are people that do.
So the break-even point of this $60 is $3,000, which is not that hard to hit. In fact, it's right around, and I suspect this is why management priced it that way, it's right around the average household spend at Costco. So they want to make it basically break even for basically everyone.
Which is so awesome and also different than other retailers. I mean, now there's all sorts of fancy technology systems to do this, but Costco has always been able to track customer spend at the individual level because they're all members. They have accounts for all of them.
100%. And other people might invent something like this to say, well, we're going to bet that they won't use it, they won't shop here enough, and we'll get to make some money on the people who are infrequent shoppers. And we're excited about that. And we'll basically get the breakage on people who pay for the upgraded membership but don't, shop enough. That's not at all what Costco is doing here. And to illustrate that, here's the insane part of it.
What is it?
If you do not use it, they will refund it.
So great.
Is there anything more Costco than that? It is an amazing value for members. It is such a good value that 55% of US members now do it. But much like everything else we've talked about with Costco, it is also amazing for Costco because they get your money at the beginning of the year, further advantaging their cash flow position. And it gets even better because it makes you more likely to go shop there now since you get even better deals with the cashback. You effectively, instead of getting the 14% gross margin, Costco is now only making a 12% margin on you when you shop there. So as long as you're spending $3,000 or more, it basically just makes Costco's margin even lower for everything you purchase. Interestingly, 45% of paid members worldwide are executive members, but those members represent 73% of sales. So whether by causation or correlation, executive members just spend more, and estimates are that regular members buy less than 1/3 of what executive members do. So it's this fascinating customer segmentation thing where Costco just gets to know and reward the most frequent shoppers who do the highest volume purchasing. Executive members, as you would guess, also renew at a higher rate, and so it helps with retention. On top of that, which they call the triple play, membership.
These guys are so folksy. I love it.
If you get the Costco issued Citi Visa card, you renew at an even higher rate. So they have these layers of letting you opt into loyalty. And all of this, David, as you mentioned earlier, is on top of a high renewal rate anyway. 93% of members in the US renew every single year.
Amazing. And you can really see the fingerprints of this DNA in Amazon Prime. Obviously, the whole thing is inspired by the Costco membership writ large, but these same dynamics definitely play out for Prime members at Amazon of order more frequently, much more likely to renew, access a whole suite of services.
It keeps you in the Amazon ecosystem and it makes sure that you're buying more stuff.
Yep.
Amazon makes money on the stuff, Costco makes money on the membership, but at the end of the day, it is nice to retain a loyal customer. To contextualize the 93% member retention, again, that's just all members. That's not even the executive members or the credit card owners. Subscriptions to streaming services renew like half of their customers every year. So consumer subscriptions retaining at 93+% is nuts. That's the monthly retention of most streaming services. It's crazy. On top of all of this, I'm pretty sure that this has never been disclosed and I haven't asked anyone about it, but if you sort of read trade publications, people seem pretty convinced that Costco is making money, which of course they are, on the deal that they cut with Citi and Visa in order to have the Costco card be the Citi Visa card. I mean, most of the time when you are processing payments, you owe 2 to 3% of each transaction to the issuer of the card. I think the dynamics are actually the opposite way with Costco, where Costco gets to hold an auction and say, we have an enormous amount of payment volume with enormously good customers with good credit. Would you like to do business with us? And who would like to pay us for the privilege of being the Costco card rails?
Yeah, I imagine there's not a lot of defaults in the Costco customer segment base. There's also some fun history to all this too. So that deal, which you may know, Ben, used to be with American Express. And then they essentially kind of held an auction, as you say.